Good morning, it's Deb here, and it's day 4 of Health and Wellness Week. And this morning we've got Lisa Jones joining us, who's going to be talking to us about mental health and wellness. Now, Lisa is also a self-confessed neuroscience geek, and I find her absolutely fascinating to listen to. And occasionally I recognise some of the things she's talking about, and I think, oh, I did learn something during my psychology degree. So that's always refreshing to know. I can see that Lisa is online watching, so I'm going to invite her into the group, and I'm going to ask her to share with us all of her expertise. Now let me have a look. They keep moving the buttons on here that I need to press, but Lisa joining us now. I can see a number of you have joined us as well. You're in for a treat this morning. Still suffering a little bit with hay fever, so morning, Lisa. Great to see you. Hopefully we won't have the usual issues that I've been having with technology. But I think we're there. A few glitches a few moments ago, weren't there? But we're there anyway. Nothing to get us too stressed out about. That's the important thing. So, Lisa, it's so great to have you here. Thank you for coming in a bit earlier. As you've seen, I'm due to speak on the radio at 10 o'clock, so I needed to move things about this morning. I really appreciate you supporting me with that. That's great. Thank you. Tell me, Lisa, tell us a bit about what it is you do and what is psychotherapy?
It's $1 million question. Basically, in a nutshell, the easiest way to explain it is any kind of talking therapy that addresses issues of the mind, let's say, or the brain, would be classed as psychotherapy. So psychology, so therapy and psychology. So there are lots of different methodologies. There are lots of different theories. There are lots of different ways of kind of doing it. But kind of psychotherapy as a broad umbrella term is helping people understand, like I say, kind of issues to do with the mind and the brain, everything, but predominantly the kind of psychological aspect.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'm picking up from that then that it's a lot of talking therapies. Would that be right?
Yes, absolutely. So generally, traditional psychotherapy is very much talking therapy, founded by Sigmund Freud. Most people have heard of him. And then Carl Jung, Anna Freud, there's a whole load, Victoria Satir, there's a whole load of kind of people of kind of therapists from way back when who founded this idea of psychotherapy based on psychology and psychiatry. And Freud very much founded the psychoanalysis movement. But throughout the years, of course, we have counselling. That's also very similar. It's part of it. Nowadays, for example, a hypnotherapist would call themselves a psychotherapist because, again, it's dealing with the mind. It's dealing with those kind of issues, the psychological and physical aspects, and looking at mind-body connections. So really, psychotherapy is predominantly talking therapy, but it can be delivered, I guess, in multiple ways.
Okay, fantastic. And I'm aware that at the moment, health or mental health and wellness is very much on the agenda as we're in lockdown, not able to go about our normal daily lives. It is impacting a lot of people. And I don't know that I particularly want us to focus on health and mental health and wellness during lockdown specifically, because although it is an issue that we all have to deal with, it is hopefully only a temporary solution problem. But are you able to share any sort of tips or advice on looking after your mental health and wellness generally, not just in lockdown, but, you know, to give us some longevity?
Absolutely, and it's such a great question, and you're right. There's a huge focus at the moment, obviously, on mental health and wellness, especially given the current situation. It's also Mental Health Awareness Week next week, so there's lots of kind of talk about it. There's lots of rhetoric around that now. But the first thing that I would, I guess, like to say to people is to just think about when somebody says mental health, what's the kind of association with that? For most people, the association is something negative, because what's happened is when people talk about mental health, what they're actually talking about is mental illness or struggles with our mental health. Mental health itself is actually very, very positive, in the same way that our physical health, when we talk about our physical health, we don't think about physical illness, we think about physical health. Yes. And the definition of health is the absence of disease. So if we're talking about our mental health, it's the absence of disease in that respect as well. So kind of just to just to flip that on its head, you know, so mental health is not the same as mental illness. So for people to try and make that differentiation right from the get-go to help break that stigma as well. Everybody knows the statistic. 1 in 4 of us will struggle with a mental health challenge. I always say that's a load of rubbish. I get in trouble for saying that. But actually, when I say one in all of us, 100% of us will have a mental health challenge at some stage in our life. Because looking after our mental health is the same as looking after our physical health. We are not always going to be completely 100% physically fit. We might get a cold, we might get a bug, we might get, you know, things happen. The same with our minds and our brains. Something might happen, for example, loss, a bereavement. Of course, that's going to impact how we feel and our mental health. So, so none of us are immune to it, but it doesn't mean that we're all going to really struggle. But absolutely, there are ways to improve and maintain our mental health and well-being. And there are lots and lots and lots of ways to do it. I've been making my notes, you know, so I thought, right, what kind of top tips can I give everyone in terms of, you know, looking after that? So if it's all right to just kind of really quickly just talk about the brain, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
So just again, so as you know, I am all about the brain. I love the brain, and I talk about brain health as opposed to mental health. So if you think of your brain or one's brain, ultimately it's the control center for everything. It controls everything that we do, our brain. You know, if we don't have our brain, sadly, we die. It's that simple. You know, we cannot survive without our brain. We can survive without lots of other organs, but we cannot survive without our brain. So it controls everything. So it's actually about what can we do to maintain our brain health. So if you were to imagine your brain as the engine of a car, okay, so obviously in order for the car to work, it needs to have the engine. The engine has to be ticking over. Okay, so obviously we need to get it serviced and do all of those things to ensure that the engine's working and the car can still run. So the brain's like the engine of the car. Our minds, I describe as being the steering wheel and the gears. So we control the direction and the speed that we want to travel in. But in order to do that, the engine has to be working. The car has to be working. So we need to have it serviced. We need to put air in the tires. We need to make sure the oil is clean and, you know, is full. We need to make sure there's petrol or diesel in the car. There are lots of things that we need to do to ensure the effective running of a vehicle. And in the same way, our brains, we need to ensure the effective running of our brains, because that then controls our mental health, emotional health, and our physical health. Absolutely. And spiritual health, depending on someone's you know, personal belief set. So they're all very much interlinked. So I never kind of try and look at that, oh, let's just talk about mental health, or let's just talk about physical health. Yes, they're really important, but they are all absolutely interlinked and ultimately led by the brain. It's just like, well, let's focus on our brain health and see what we can do, you know, to keep that ticking over. So then everything else, in theory, ticks along nicely as well.
Absolutely. So what I'm hearing actually, and I'm taking lots of notes whilst you're speaking as well. So if I look like I'm not paying attention, I'm making notes. What I'm hearing is that actually prevention is important. Much as we maintain a car to prevent it rusting or breaking down, what you're suggesting is we have to look after our brain to prevent that breaking down as well.
Absolutely. And it is so important. And the way we do that is we use a model called the biopsychosocial model, which is quite a tongue twister. So if you imagine your brain in the center. So what it is, it's the biology, the psychology, and the sociology. So we call it the top down, bottom up, outside in model. Okay, so you've got your brain in the middle. The top down is very much our thoughts, our beliefs, our mindset, all of those things that we can influence and can control. Then our bottom up, that is our biology. So things that we perhaps can't control, depends again on somebody's school of thought. There's a lot of other research out there as well on things like epigenetics and what have you. So we've got our genetic makeup, our biological makeup. With that, then we're looking at our immune system, our hormones, our endocrine system. There's a whole wealth of other things going on as well, digestive systems, etc. All of those, again, we can influence through predominantly sleep, nutrition, and physical activity. There are other things again, but so that generally we can control or have some control over. And then the outside in, the sociological
I have the same problem.
Oh, is kind of very much like the environmental factors. So in our present, our environmental factors, but also based on our life experience. So where we grew up, who our parents were, our family relationships, our social networks, our education, all of those things also influence as well. So life events, stresses, and stressors, I mean by that, things that might happen that are out of our control,
Mm-hmm.
all of that will influence our brain health. So it's about, so when we're thinking about our mental health and brain health, we're looking at all three of those areas and kind of thinking, okay, where can I perhaps change? Where can I perhaps improve? What can I be doing in each of these areas to enhance my brain and mental health?
Absolutely. So what I'm hearing is that actually our brain is constantly being bombarded by,
Mm-hmm.
you know, stressors from a multitude of different areas, and we need to actually develop the coping system, if you like, to try and prevent those stressors from getting in and causing damage.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And that's about building resilience. And the
Mm.
biggest, and people talk about it a lot, but there is a reason. The most, I guess, influential buffer against stress and to build resilience is connection, and that's human connection. So at the moment, obviously, we are having a very different experience of that human connection because it's via video, it's via phone, it's via texting, emails, etc. So it's a digital connection as opposed to a face-to-face actual connection in person. So it is different, but nonetheless, it is still valid. It is still really, really, really important because what connection does is it ultimately we're kind of tribal animals, really, if you think from an evolutionary perspective. So we have our tribe. We are social animals as well. So that connection is really, really important in terms of our safety and all of those things. But that community, excuse me, that shared experience and what it does when we're connecting with somebody, when we're bonding with them, it releases something called oxytocin, which is a
Mhm.
feel-good neurotransmitter. When we basically, it's known as the love drug. So that kind of it creates that bonding. It helps. That's why when not for everyone, but generally when mothers give birth, there's a huge surge of oxytocin, which causes that bonding. That's why hugging is so effective and so powerful at times. And actually, just on that, if it's okay, whilst I'm thinking of it, just going to give you a really quick tip. So for people in this current situation, and you can do it all the time, it doesn't have to be just because we're in isolation, it's a good thing to do anyway. But if somebody is feeling a bit isolated or a bit lonely and lacking in that physical touch, which is so important, that physical contact, doing something as simple as this, just
Okay.
stroking the arms and kind of just focusing on your breathing and just stroking the arms and saying something rude like an affirmation. So something,
Mm.
and you can say what you like, but something along the lines of, I feel safe, I feel comforted, I'm okay. And just spend a couple of minutes just doing this gentle stroking. And again, what it does, it just kind of signals to the brain that physical touch, that connection, that I'm okay, I'm safe. So you can do that with your arms. You can also do it with your nose. I know a lot of parents used to do that with their children, their babies.
I actually,
Stroke.
yes, I did that with my son. I still do
Yeah,
occasionally, although
yeah,
he's 6 foot now and 15, so he won't thank me for telling you that.
yeah. So stroking the nose and also the eyebrows. Just
Mhm.
it's that very just gentle touch that just, like I say, it just kind of signals to the brain and reminds ourselves that we do have that physical contact, but connection is so so important, and it actually literally buffers the neurons, it buffers the brain cells, it
Mhm.
creates it makes them stronger, so more resilient to damage.
Okay, that's really interesting, particularly as you just did that on the face.
Yeah.
I This morning, as I was getting washed and brushing my teeth, etc., I looked in the mirror. I thought, "Oh my goodness, I would kill for a facial right now." And I have a
Mm-hmm.
facial maybe once a year. I'm not somebody
Yes,
that has
yeah,
to have a regular facial. I enjoy them; they're a bit of a treat, but they're not a must-have for me. And I couldn't understand this absolute urge. This one, I thought, oh my goodness, as soon as we're out of lockdown, I'm booking a facial. And that's just
yes,
not me. But you
yeah, yeah,
explaining that and just doing that made me realize actually it's that
yeah,
connection, that I'm missing.
absolutely.
And you get used to, I mean, I'm fortunate my partner's here and he's very tactile and so there's a lot of connection there, but you get used to that, and it's having that connection with other people, actually, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, definitely the physical connection, but also just that social connection,
Mm.
interacting with other people is so, so important. Having that, again, there's no other word other than connection, really. That, just and prioritizing that where we can, making time for that. I do appreciate though on the flip side, and I know I've experienced this, that with this form of communication that we're all experiencing at the moment, people are talking about kind of Zoom fatigue and all of these things, because when we are online, it's really quite challenging. It's challenging to be online all the time, because it's a different way of communicating. It's a completely different way of having to do it. So it's also okay. I know lots of people, like I say, myself included, who, as the lockdown's kind of going on, it's kind of going, actually, I don't need to perhaps chat to friends or family every single night, or do a quiz or something else, or have myself, because actually all I've done is made myself incredibly busy, and that feels equally as overwhelming and stressful, which is not helpful for our mental or our brain health. So recognizing those triggers as well, and also being able to say, actually, I'm all right. I don't need to do another quiz this week. I've done 5. I think I'm probably okay. But kind of just being aware of that as well, and that it is okay to take a step back. So finding that balance, it's always about balance. Everything I talk about is finding that balance and staying connected, but at the same time looking after yourself enough and having those boundaries in place to keep yourself feeling well, because we still need to take downtime, we still need to take rest, we still need to give our minds and our brains times to slow down and calibrate and do all of those things as well.
Absolutely. So I'm also hearing then, or I'm translating that having boundaries in place is also about not being afraid to say no.
Absolutely, yes.
And that's a
Yeah.
whole other life.
Yes.
We could run an entire day's workshop on that one.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right. And when we talk about kind of self-care or being compassionate with oneself and kind to oneself and all of those things, we're not just talking about, oh, go and have a bath, have a facial, go and do your nails. And they're quite superficial things, and they're lovely, they're great, and they make us feel good. But it's just as important, actually, obviously, to make time for self-care in the sense of, to make sure that we are eating well and exercising and doing all of those things, getting out in nature, just spending some time to feel grounded, listen to the birds, smell the flowers, all of those things. But actually, self-care is as much about the other stuff. So things like boundaries, expectations, all of those things, because often, and so many people do it, and especially women, and it is true that that's not a sexist comment, it is true that especially women will put everybody else, because they're generally in the caregiver role, they'll put everybody else first, forget about themselves, and they'll run themselves ragged and run themselves into the ground. And then if they think about taking some time for themselves, they feel guilty or they feel selfish. But actually learning to say no, because it doesn't necessarily have to mean no, not ever. It might just be, I can't do that right now. No, now is not, the time. So you're not necessarily saying no, not ever, but just accepting that it is absolutely okay and giving yourself permission to say no. So you need time out as well. People need to also, rest, recover. As I put a post on boundaries just the other day, because, finding in lockdown that people are, because everybody's working from home, there's this kind of tendency that people are just getting in touch about work and what have you at any time of day or night and the weekend. And it's like, no, just because I'm at home, or one is at home working, that doesn't mean that I'm still working at 10 o'clock at night or on a Saturday or a Sunday. Those boundaries still need to be in place. And I know myself, and I know lots of other people, we've all kind of slipped a little bit in that way. So again, just taking a step back and being honest with ourselves and saying, oh, okay, actually, I might need to be a bit firmer on that boundary there, and to ensure that, you're looking after yourself as well.
Absolutely. I know on that note, you and I had a conversation the other day, didn't we, about boundaries. And I said to you, I can't believe I've only just recently discovered airplane mode on my phone. So it switches off and it goes silent, because I don't know how many times I'd be woken up in the middle of the night with my phone pinging, although it's not in the bedroom, it's pinging loud enough for me to hear. And it would be because, of course, we have connections all over the world. So different time zones are coming online. It's their morning, they're responding or liking or commenting on things. That notification is waking you up. Airplane mode has been an absolute godsend for me. I've slept so much better since discovering it. And I know
Absolutely.
you were saying the same thing. It's absolutely incredible. And these boundaries are so right. And that feeling of being selfish is a tough one to overcome, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. But ultimately, it's that saying, fit your own oxygen mask first, because and if people don't know that, and I just explain it, that if we were on a plane, they tell you if the plane goes down, you put your own oxygen mask on before you attempt to help other people. Life is very much the same. If we don't have our oxygen mask on, if we're not looking after ourselves, how can we possibly expect
Exactly.
to be there and help other people? We can't. We are not that. I like to think that we're kind of, super women, but sadly, we're not. We do have to look after ourselves. Otherwise, that's why people burn out. That's why people, because ultimately they give and give and give. They don't fill up their own, I call it their resilience reserves.
Hmm.
That's just getting depleted. And then we're running on empty. Imagine running your car with no petrol, no oil, no air in the tyres. It's not going to last very long before that absolutely breaks down.
No, no,
And
that's
we're
true.
the
I mean,
same.
and how often have we driven a car and said, "Oh my goodness, I'm driving on fumes. I've got to get to the petrol station." And the anxiety that that brings about. So if you're doing that to your brain, it is going to
Absolutely.
cause no end of trouble and increase your anxiety.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just, yeah, in terms of things, so I'm just noticing, so I'm very aware of the time and knowing that you need to get on the radio, which is so exciting, by the way.
That's all
Just
right.
if it's all right, just to give kind of like two tips very quickly for people to kind of
Absolutely.
that they can take away. One of them is gratitude. Everybody talks about gratitude all the time. I refer to it as having a daily dose of vitamin G. Okay, it's food for it's vitamins for our soul. And it's so important because very simply, what it does is it teaches, and it's about the brain. There is an actual neurological reason for it. It is what it does. There's a saying that energy goes where focus flows. Okay, and neurons that fire together wire together. So if we purposefully focus on something that we're grateful for, or something positive, or something like that, what it's telling our brain to notice it. So then what happens is over time, the more we focus and practice noticing something, the more our brain then does it automatically. So our brains will go, oh, look at that beautiful sunset. Isn't that lovely? Or whatever it might be. And then by practicing gratitude regularly, it improves our self-esteem, it improves our overall happiness, it improves our relationships with people. And there are so many ways that we can do to do it, even things like, writing someone a thank you note. Or granted, this isn't quite the same now, but when things are kind of in normal circumstances, somebody holds the door open for you. Thank you so much. Saying thank you. A colleague offers to make you a cup of tea. Thank you so much. We can do it with our language rather than sorry if somebody's late. Sorry, I'm late. Flip it around. Thank you so much for waiting for me.
Hmm.
And there are lots of things we can do and very subtly, language is key. It's absolutely key to how we can change our language and therefore change how we perceive things, our thoughts, therefore our feelings and our behaviors, so how everything is connected. And with the language pieces, I would say the biggest tip I could give anybody is notice that inner voice. Notice the language that you are using with yourself, because most of the time it's probably not very nice. And often people say things to themselves that they wouldn't dream of saying to a loved one or a friend
Hmm.
or a colleague. They'll happily say it to themselves. And the biggest tip is to notice what we call identity statements. So I am statements. So because ultimately, if we say I am something, that goes right in at the identity level. Okay, our brain processes that as that's who I am, as opposed to something I feel. Or so, for example, when people say I am, or like I'm an anxious person. Whoa, no, absolutely not. Don't say that. Okay, that because immediately your whole identity is I'm an anxious person. So your brain and the brain also looks for evidence to support how we feel about something. So if you're telling yourself I'm an anxious person, your brain's going to go, oh yes, well do you feel anxious then, and you feel anxious then, and then this happens, then this, oh crikey, and it's not a good place to be. And then we can spiral into those kind of negative thought patterns. So the trick is to always use the word feel. So somebody might feel like they're an anxious person. That doesn't mean they are. So it might be, I feel depressed, I feel anxious, I feel stressed, I feel overwhelmed. I feel unattractive. I feel fat. I feel ugly. You know, whatever those things that people, you know, that we do say to ourselves. So it's a case of it's a feeling as opposed to a fact. And even with things like, for example, dyslexia, I hear it all the time. If you say, "Oh, I'm dyslexic," and I'm like, "You have dyslexia." Or when people describe other people, they're Asperger's, they're dyslexic. That no, they have dyslexia, for example, they have autism. So it's not who they are. And that's so important to differentiate for people because ultimately we all feel things. We all feel depressed, we all feel low, we all feel anxious at times. We do. That's part of being a human. That doesn't mean we have a mental illness necessarily. That doesn't mean that there is something horribly wrong with us either. It's recognizing that we all have feelings and they ebb and flow, and so kind of trying to break away those stigmas and try and break down those very powerful identity statements which can have really negative consequences for us.
Wow, that's absolutely fantastic, Lisa. There's just so much information you have given us today. I'm so grateful to you coming on and sharing your knowledge and your expertise. It's fantastic. And from my point of view, it's great to hear that you and I follow fairly similar routes when we're doing our coaching as well. You've talked about so many of the things I talk about with my coaching clients. I know you talk about them with your coaching clients as well. And that's great because that gives me even more confidence that I'm doing the right thing. You know, it's always good to hear that your peers are doing something similar to you, isn't it? You know, you're on the right track. But Lisa, where, if people want to find out more, want to work with you, where can they get hold of you?
So either for one-to-one work, my website is lisajonescoaching.co.uk. It's very simple. For corporate work, because I do a lot of training, I train in this as well for stress in the workplace, enhancing staff well-being. So that's headstrongtraining.co.uk. Brilliant. So that's the kind of training side, and then Lisa Jones Coaching is the private one-to-one side.
That's fantastic. And I will be putting up links to where people can find you shortly when the live goes up, probably after I've done my radio interview, but yes, who knows. And tomorrow there'll be a full roundup of the week that we've just had. It's been an incredible week. Thank you so much for being part of it. I really do appreciate it. I'm so grateful for it. You know, there's my daily dose of vitamin G for you. You've helped me there. And I'll be rounding up tomorrow. Quite how I'm going to round up this week, I have no idea. With the amount of information I've had and that all of our experts have been part of this week has been incredible. Thank you, Lisa, so much. I really do appreciate you coming on this morning. Thank you for coming on earlier for me as well so that I can accommodate the BBC. Yeah, it'd be nice to be able to one day say, no, actually, I'm not available then. I want to do it later, wouldn't it? But maybe not just yet. I'm not quite there yet. But Lisa, thank you so much. I know we'll catch up soon. I'm sure I will be asking you to come on and share more with us at a later date as well. Really do appreciate that. If anybody wants more, lisajonescoaching.co.uk or headstrongtraining.co.uk for corporate support and training. Thank you, Lisa. It's been great having you on here. I'll see you again soon.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Bye.